Coming up in today's episode, we're going to refurbish some alloy wheels, restore some faded headlights, paint some calipers, and we're also going to remove some marks on the bodywork. And today's vehicle is a 1.4 TDCi Ford Fiesta. This is a 2007 model. So one of the main focal points we're going to be working on is these alloy wheels. They would have had a polished face from factory, which means they're diamond cut, they're almost bare metal and they have a lacquer finish over them to protect them, but unfortunately they get pitted from obviously things like stone chips as the car goes down the road, and eventually what happens is the water gets behind there, corrosion comes and they sort of bloom out and they look awful. But first off I'm going to start in the engine bay, and the reason why this car was marked down as salvage is because it initially had a couple of diesel injectors out, so it was running quite rough. And also the front bumper had been sort of cracked and pranged. Hadn't written the vehicle off, but it just looked awful and it was borderline economical repair because of the injectors, the bodywork required, the state of the alloy wheels and things like that. So what I've done here is just wash the engine down, and after that I've used some Autoglym Super Sheen dressing just to go over there, and once that's finished that'll leave that looking nice and sort of factory fresh. Once the car's all washed off, it's into the workshop, pull the centre caps off and then remove the alloy wheels. Once they're off, I can put them on a stand in a spray room and we can look to refurbish them. So first of all I'm going to start off with quite an aggressive sanding disc. This is going to be 80 grit, really gets rid of that old lacquer and any of the sort of light curbing and things like that. Once that's done I'll go down to 240 grit sandpaper and then finish up with 500. Once we've sanded down the main face of the alloy wheel, we still need to key up little areas in between, so we'll use a 1500 grade Scotch-Brite pad just to get in there. If we don't key up that area, the paint won't adhere to it, so it's important we do that. After that, we just got to tape up the alloy wheel because we don't want to get the tyre sprayed. I'm going to use a bit of hose pipe here just to cover up the tyre valve, and then what we can do is apply some primer. That's etch primer, so that'll eat into the paintwork and give us a good solid base to work on. Once that's done, we can then spray some silver paint, which is the base coat. And then finally, after that, we'll go over the lacquer, which is what gives it the shiny finish. So whilst these wheels are drying and curing off properly, we'll look to paint these calipers. Now the disc here is going to be replaced, as will the pads as well, because they're quite scored and they've got a bit of a lip on them. So if a little bit of overspray goes on them from the painting press, it's not the end of the world because they're going to be replaced shortly anyway. So first off I'm going to use a wire brush just to knock off any of the surface rust and stuff that's a bit larger. Once we've done that I can then go over to a sanding disc for like 240 grit, something similar I've used on the wheels. And then finally again I'll use a bit of Scotch-Brite pad just to sort of get a nice finish on there, loosen anything off that I can do. After that I'll use some brake and clutch cleaner, which will evaporate but remove any of the dust and sort of debris on the surface. Use an airline to blow that off as well. And then after that it's just a case of masking up areas I don't want any paint on them. Usually I find old seat covers really good actually, because you can wrap it around certain areas. There's always one lying around in the workshop. And after that we've got some dedicated caliper paint, and it's just a case of spraying them on. I've accelerated the time here. Obviously you'd give it a gap in between painting them, so you'd leave it for 4 or 5 minutes, and then give it another coat. Sometimes these take 2 or 3 coats, 4 coats before you get good coverage. So once the front calipers are painted and the rear drums as well, I'm going to turn my attention to the headlights. So what I'm going to do here is just spray some soapy water over here. Some highly diluted all-purpose cleaner is going to be more than good enough. Just acts as a little bit of lubrication for the wet and dry sandpaper. and I've started with 2000 grit. 2 to 2500 grade is probably really all you need to do for headlights, then you can work back from that. And when sanding the headlights, I'm just trying to get a uniform matte finish on them so I know that all the areas have been covered. And as I'm going to show on each individual headlight, you can do it different ways, but it is possible to use a small miniature polisher, like something like this, and you can get very good results quite quickly. Also, as we'll see on the second headlight, you can use a full-size buffer as well, get it on there, and it's going to speed that process up. It just depends on how intricate the headlight is, really. So, random bit of information, this sort of shape Fiesta came out in 2002, and the headlight was sort of one sort of shape to start off with. Where I've got the polisher at the moment, as of sort of 2006, they facelifted the front end, and the headlight got this sort of ridge on the top corner, which makes it a bit unique, a little bit more complicated to work on, but it's not the end of the world. Just one of those little design changes they made throughout its lifetime. On with a bit of tar and glue remover. I get for a lot of it, so I put it in a big sort of 1.5 litre pump sprayer, leave it on there probably for about 4 or 5 minutes just to soak in and do its magic, and then we just loosened it off. We just go with the old microfiber and just rub it off. Another part of the decontamination process here, I've just got some clay lube, sprayed it over the bodywork, and just going over the clay bar to get any of the contaminants off the top of the paint before we machine polish it. Now, as mentioned before, it's had a second-hand bumper fitted to the front, so it's never going to be a perfect match between the front wing and the bumper, but at the end of the day, this is a cheaper vehicle, its price range. So my task here is just to run the buffer over here and just sort of get any swirls and light marring out the paintwork and just enhance its gloss, really. And it's another example of where a micro polisher can come in really handy. So we've got this little swage line here on the wheel arch, and it's got a black mark on it. So what's probably happened is someone's rubbed up against something like a traffic cone or, you know, a bollard, and it's just transferred a little bit of paint onto the surface. We give it a rub over and it's sorted. Once all the trim dressing's been applied to the black areas, I'll go around with a little touch-up brush and just sort of do the obvious stone chips and areas that might have been caught, like the door edge here where someone's opened it, banged it against something else. Just takes your eye off it and makes the car look a little bit nicer. A bit of auto glym fast glass for the windows will get them looking nice. I use a dedicated glass cloth for that as well. And then for the finale, what I'll do is, the alloy wheels have this quite large centre cap, as we can see. It's painted in the centre, and around the outside it has this chrome effect, and it's just become quite weathered. So it seemed a shame to stick that back on the car as it was when we refurbished the alloy wheels. So a quick buff and it's going to improve them greatly. We can fit them back onto the nicely freshly painted alloy wheel, and then just apply some tyre dressing and it finishes the overall look. And with these finishing touches done, we can take the car outside and do a few before and afters. So this has taken me about a day to do in total, and as I say, we're not going to go for the super concourse finish, but it's definitely a massive improvement on a car that's price range and can do somebody a good turn. And I think for myself as well, I like doing jobs like this because it just gives you a little bit of a break from the norm, and there's quite a vast difference between before and after. And you also feel like you saved a car, really, because this might have just been broken for spares or just cheaply used for a year and thrown in the tip afterwards, whereas a bit of time and effort, a bit of repair by someone else, and this should do somebody a good turn for 2 or 3 years, maybe a bit longer. So I hope you enjoyed this video. There'll be another one next week, and thank you for watching.